Hey guys, today I'll be making my first ever prediction for the 2022 gubernatorial elections, which will have a major impact on how the 50 states will be governed for at least the next 4 to 5 years. So going into the 2022 gubernatorial elections, the Democrats, of course, in 2021 were able to hold on to New Jersey, while the Republicans with Glenn Youngkin flipped the state of Virginia, defeating Terry McAuliffe. So the Democrats start off with 6 governorships, the Republicans with 38. There are 36 gubernatorial elections that will occur in 2022, with the Democrats defending 16 of their governorships and the GOP defending 20. The GOP, of course, currently has 28 governors and the Democrats having 22. So definitely the GOP comes in with an advantage. However, these 36 can definitely change the balance of power in the governorships in the United States. So I'm going to start off by filling in the solid Democratic governorships. So with the state of California and Gavin Newsom winning his re-election, I think this will definitely be solid in California. Gavin Newsom won his recall election just a couple months ago by over 20%, so I don't think it'll be too difficult for him to win his re-election in California, one of the most democratic states in the country. As well as that, in the state of Hawaii, David Ige will not be able to run for a third term, so he will be term limited. However, he will, of course, be replaced by a Democrat, really no matter what at this point. The state of Hawaii, again, one of the most liberal states in the country. New York, another one of the most liberal states in the country, the Empire State, with Kathy Hochul as its first female governor in its entire history. Kathy Hochul, of course, was a lieutenant governor to Andrew Cuomo, and after Cuomo resigned after his scandal a couple of months ago, Kathy Hochul, I think, will win her party's renomination for the governorship and will win her first 4-year term in 2022. And finally, in the state of New Mexico, Michelle Lujan Grisham, I think that she will be able to win her re-election with a solid margin. She won by 14.4% in 2018, and I think that 2022 she will be able to expand that margin to over 15%, making it solid. Now, for the GOP, we have a lot of solid states for them because they are defending a lot more. So many of these very traditionally conservative states will continue to vote for the Republican governor. So starting off in the state of Idaho, I have Brad Little winning his re-election, Mark Gordon in Wyoming. In the state of Nebraska, we do have Pete Ricketts running, will not be able to run for his re-election. He will be term limited, so Pete Ricketts will not be able to run for a third term, but he will, of course, be replaced by a Republican, really without a doubt. In the state of Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt, I think, will win his re-election with a solid margin, won by a likely one in 2018, a margin of just 12.1%, but I think that it will go up in 2022 for him. And neighboring Arkansas will also be solid for Asa Hutchinson, who will also be term limited, actually. So currently, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the former White House press secretary under Donald Trump, basically one of his first press secretaries, I believe, if not the first, but Sarah Huckabee Sanders is likely to win that GOP nomination there. This is her home state, and I do think that she has a pretty good chance at winning the governorship in Arkansas with a solid margin, even though it will be an open one, as Hutchinson will not be able to run for re-election in 2022. In the state of Tennessee, Bill Lee winning his re-election, I think, is very probable with a likely margin. And finally, in the state of Alabama, the final solid state I have on this map for the GOP, being Kay Ivey and his re-election in 2022 as well. He, of course, won his first race by 19% in 2018. So I actually lied earlier there. We do have 2 more. I think these are going to be pretty surprising if you're unaware of how these governorships work. But in the states of Vermont and New Hampshire, I have both of them as solid for the GOP for right now, with Phil Scott in Vermont and Chris Sununu in the state of New Hampshire. So the governors in Vermont and New Hampshire are elected every 2 years. So in 2018, Phil Scott won by 14.9% and Chris Sununu by 7% in 2018. In 2016, both of these governors won their first terms as Republicans, Phil Scott by 8.7% and Sununu by 2.3%. So I think it is pretty interesting because Vermont is a much more Democratic state than New Hampshire, although both are relatively Democratic compared to many other states in the country. In 2020, of course, they were both up for re-election. Scott won by 41% and Sununu won by 31%. So both these governors won by huge, solid margins in 2020. I think that they will win by solid margins again in 2022. I don't think they will face too tough of a challenge from the Democratic Party in both these states, as their seats are pretty much secured for them, at least for another 2 years after 2022. And this puts the GOP up at 17 seats, to the Democrats at 10, after these solid governorships have been filled in. I'm now going to categorize the likely governorships on this map, starting off with the Democratic Party. There's quite a handful of them. So starting off with the state of Oregon, I have Kate Brown winning her re-election. She was first elected in 2016 as governor of Oregon in the 2016 gubernatorial special election. In 2018, she won her re-election by a margin of 6.4%. I think that she'll be able to win by over 7% in 2022. So this will be a likely seat for the Democratic Party. In Colorado, Jared Polis, he won by 10% in 2018. I think will win his re-election again with a likely margin. I think too interesting here, likely margin being margins of 7 to 15%. In the state of Connecticut, led Lamont, who won by just 3% in 2018. I think he will be able to do better in 2022 and win by a likely margin. Connecticut is a very Democratic state, and I don't think it will be too difficult for him to increase his margin there. In neighboring Rhode Island, Dan McKee, I think, will also win his re-election, as well as J.B. Pritzker in the state of Illinois. So Pritzker won by a solid margin in 2018. I don't think it will stand as the state of Illinois continues to shift to the right. And in the state of Rhode Island, Raimondo won by 15.5%. However, she became Biden's Commerce Secretary after the 2020 presidential election, and so Dan McKee was able to replace her. And I think that McKee will win his re-election pretty strongly in 2022. And then finally, in the state of Maryland, this is a flip for the Democratic Party. Larry Hogan, who won his re-election in 2018 by a margin of 11%, will not be able to run for re-election for a third term in 2022. And I think this is a blessing for the Democratic Party, as they have a very good chance here at flipping the state, a state that, is very Democratic in at its core, but, of course, on the gubernatorial level, many Democratic and Republican states elect governors of the opposite party, like we saw in Virginia in 2021. It still is overly Democratic, but it has shown, again, that governors can win, even if they're not the party that the majority of the state is, if they're popular enough. So in Maryland, with Larry Hogan unable to run for his re-election, I think Democratic Party will be able to pick that up, putting them up at 16 seats. Now, for the GOP, they're at 17, and so I'm going to add on with their likely governorships. And so in the state of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, who has become a pretty popular national figure, at least among the GOP, I think she will be able to win her re-election with a likely margin. She won by just 3.4% in 2018, so she'll definitely have to improve. In the state of Iowa, Kim Reynolds, I think that she will also be able to win her re-election in the state of Iowa. And Mike DeWine in Ohio, of course, one of the most popular governors in the country. Both of these governors in the lower Midwest, I think, will be able to win their re-elections. Kim Reynolds in Iowa and Mike DeWine in Ohio. And finally, the final likely gubernatorial election in South Carolina here, I think, will be likely for the GOP, with Henry McMaster winning his re-election. So in 2018, he won his first 4-year term before he previously replaced Nikki Haley just a couple of months before that. So in 2018, McMaster won by 18 points, but in 2014, of course, we had the re-election of Nikki Haley. But Nikki Haley, of course, became Donald Trump's UN ambassador, and so McMaster was able to replace her, and in 2018, he was able to win his first term, and 2022, I think he will be able to win a second full term as governor of South Carolina, putting the GOP up at 21 governorships. And so after the likely and solid gubernatorial races have been categorized here, the Republicans stand at 21 and the Democrats at 16. And so now we're going to move on to taking a look at the lean states here on this map, with the lean governorships being ones where the victors win by margins of 2 to 7%. So I'm going to start off with the state of Maine and Janet Mills. In the state of Maine, of course, for the Democratic Party, I think that Mills will be able to win her re-election. She won in 2018 by 7.7% to a first full term as governor, and in 2022 I think she will be able to win a second. Tim Walz, I have him winning his re-election in Minnesota, won by a likely margin in 2018, but I think it will go down to lean for him in 2022. This is just a part of the whole dynamic that 2022 is probably going to be a red wave year, as the Democratic Party is not pulling too well, neither with the generic congressional ballot nor with Joe Biden's approval as the Democratic president. In the state of Pennsylvania, this is the final lean state for the Democratic Party here. Tom Wolf will be term limited, so he will not be able to run for a third term. If he was not term limited, then of course this would definitely be likely or solid or likely. But in 2018, he won his re-election by 17%. 2022, he will not be able to run for re-election, but I think that a Democrat will replace him, and they will not have that much trouble winning because the Democratic Party has been so successful with Tom Wolf in the past. I think that it won't be as difficult to re-elect a Democrat here than in many of these other Midwestern states. Even though this is an open seat, I think that electing a Democrat to replace Wolf will not be too hard for them. So right now I have the state of Pennsylvania as lean for the Democratic Party. And for the lean states now for the GOP, we have the state of Alaska. This is going to be a pretty tough win for the GOP, I think, as they've been running against many independents for a very long time here. In 2018, Mike Dunleavy only won by a margin of 7% against Mark Begich. And so in 2014, Bill Walker was elected governor of the state as an independent, but in 2018, he did not run for re-election. And in 2022, he's coming back and challenging Dunleavy, who was first elected in just 2018. So you have a governor running against a former governor. I think it'll be a very interesting race. But in the end, I think that the incumbent will come out on top with the GOP holding on to the state of Alaska, and there being no independent with there being no independent governor after 2022. We also have the state of Texas as lean for the GOP, with Greg Abbott winning his re-election against Beto O'Rourke. I think that O'Rourke will put up a pretty strong fight, but I don't think that he will do as well as he did against Ted Cruz, because Greg Abbott is nowhere near as unpopular as the senator, and I think that with Greg Abbott being the governor of the state and not senator, I think that it will be more difficult to actually remove him because he will not be representing the state on the national level. We also have the state of Massachusetts with Charlie Baker. I think this will also be lean. Charlie Baker, of course, won his re-election in 2018 by a solid margin of 33.5% in the most democratic state in the country. I mean, this state is a state where every single one of its congressional districts are all solid blue. So in Massachusetts, it will be very hard. Actually, it would seem pretty hard for a Republican to win in a state like Massachusetts, but Charlie Baker did it in 2018, winning, 66% of the vote, winning 2 times more votes than his opponent, Jake Gonzalez. 2022, I think he will be able to win his re-election. There are no term limits in the state of Massachusetts, so he will be able to run for a third term, and I think that although he won't do nearly as well as he did 3 years ago from now in 2021, but I do think that he will be able to win his re-election there with a lean margin. In the state of Florida, Ron DeSantis, I think he will also win his re-election. He barely won his first election to a first full 4-year term in Florida in 2018 against Andrew Gillum, but in 2022, I think things will be a little bit easier for the incumbent now. Ron DeSantis winning just 49.6% in 2018. I think 2022 will be a better year for him, and I think he will be able to win his re-election there with a margin larger than 2%. And finally, in the state of Arizona, I have the Republicans holding on to this governorship as well. Doug Ducey will be term limited. He will not be able to run for a third term, but I think that he will be able to help the GOP and whoever their nominee is win the seat again, even though it is open. And in 2018, Doug Ducey won by an almost solid margin of 14.2%. So the state, even though on the national level it is voted for the Democratic Party in both 2018 on the Senate level as well as on the Senate level in 2020 and on the presidential level in 2020, I think the GOP will be able to hold on to the governorship here in 2022. And I also have the state of Kansas as a lean state for the GOP. This state currently is actually held by a Democrat in Laura Kelly, who won by 5% in 2018, but I think that this state will flip to being lean for the GOP. So in 2018, Laura Kelly won by 5% against Chris Kobach. That's why he was such a horrible potential choice for the GOP in the 2020 Senate nomination for the GOP in Kansas. Thank God they did not go with Chris Kobach, but for the GOP, thank God for them. But Laura Kelly won in 2018. 2022, I think it will be very, very difficult for her to win her re-election as a Democrat in such a conservative state. The state has not voted for a Democrat on the presidential level for almost a century. So Laura Kelly, I think that she will have a pretty short tenure as governor, and I think the 4 years will be the most she will get as governor of Kansas. So this puts the Republicans up at 27 and the Democrats at 19. So these final final 4 states will be tilt, and I'm going to start off with the state of Nevada, which I have as tilt for the Democratic Party. I have Steve Sisolak winning his re-election. I think that it will be a very tough race for them, on the Senate level as well with Catherine Cortez Masto, but I think that in the end, the two Democrats are still favored in Nevada, even though the state is getting more and more difficult for them to win every year. In the state of Wisconsin, I think that Tony Evers will actually be defeated. He will be running for his re-election as governor of Wisconsin. He won by just 1.1% in 2018, which was a wave year for the Democratic Party. I think that in 2022, when the circumstances are different, I think it will be very difficult for him to win his re-election. And so right now, I do have the state of Wisconsin as being tilt for the GOP, and also have the state of Georgia as tilt for them as well. I think that this will be one of the most interesting races if Stacey Abrams runs. Brian Kemp, right now the incumbent governor, may actually be primary, but I don't think that's going to happen in the end. I think the GOP is going to stay with him as governor of Georgia, even though he refused to play into Trump's election lies. But Brian Kemp won by just 1.4% in a very controversial election in 2018 for the governorship. Stacey Abrams, of course, doing very, very well, almost winning. And she, of course, did help both Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock win in 2020 to their Senate seats. So Stacey Abrams, a very high-profile figure in Georgia, very, very well known. I think that she will be able to, I think that she may be able to even improve off of her margin in 2018. I think that no matter what, she will do very well for a Democrat in Georgia against Brian Kemp for a second time. But I do think that in the end, because of the political climate right now, I think that it will be difficult for the Democratic Party to win in Georgia. So I do currently have Brian Kemp winning his re-election. And finally, in the state of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, I do think that she will be able to win her re-election as of right now. It'll be a very tough race for her. She is one of the most unpopular governors in the country. She was also criticized for having one of the worst COVID responses for a governor in the country as well a couple of months ago. So she won her first term by 9.6% in 2018. In the state of Michigan. I think that it will be a very difficult road to a re-election, but right now I do think that she is the favorite. So this puts the Democrats up at 21 governorships and 29 for the GOP. So a net increase of 1 for the Republican Party in 2022 is my final prediction, with the Democrats flipping the seat in Maryland, which Larry Hogan currently holds, while the Republicans, I think, will be able to flip the state of Kansas, hold on to states like Massachusetts, as well as flipping the state of Wisconsin, currently held by incumbent Governor Tony Evers of the Democratic Party. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to like it down below if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you have not. Comment down below which party you think will win the most governorships in 2022, as well as which races you are watching. Subscribe to my channel again if you haven't, and I will see you guys in the next video.